Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me for our December webinar, How Investing in Your Employees Pays Off. I am Matt Firestone, president of Firestone Consulting Group. And just real quick, a little bit about Firestone Consulting Group. Uh, at Firestone Consulting Group, we work with the leaders and owners in the construction industry to build businesses for the lifestyle they desire through leveraging their people and developing well-oiled systems to operate their business. Our proven methods are based on real-world experiences in running and growing contracting businesses. With years of hands-on experience, our team of advisors and consultants will work with you to define your goals, develop a plan to achieve them, guide you in implementing the plan, and most importantly, be right there with you to celebrate your success. Well, as you can see, today's webinar topic of investing in your employees is right in line with one of our core missions. You can see with aligning our team and tuning our processes, ultimately working to increase your profits. But as leaders and owners of construction companies, we're looking at ways that we can leverage our people to create this system and operate our business. Would like to thank our sponsor, and it's a bit of an internal sponsor here, but our sponsor for this month's webinar is the FCG High Performance Academy. This is a results-oriented program for high-performing managers in the construction industry that are there to make a difference in their company. We have an intense 6-month program that puts the learning into action and follows up with accountability to ensure that each participant achieves the results they are seeking. This isn't a canned solution or a one-stop shop. It is a program that allows us to tailor the goals and outcomes to each participant, and more importantly, to the companies that are sponsoring them to participate in the program. Our next academy starts February 10th, so just right around the corner, and registration for our February academy closes January 31st. So if you have somebody in mind, again, we're looking for those managers that are already performing at a high level that we can push to that next level and really turn them into all-stars. If you have questions, you can see the email address on the screen. Please reach out right away so we can get those questions answered, because space is limited to only 12 participants. Our last academy filled up fast. We want to ensure that if you do have someone in your company that's interested, we can get them registered for the program. So I'd like for you to consider this question. What changes have you seen in the construction industry since you have started your career? Now, we have a wide range of people. I can see some of the names here of the attendees. Some are relatively new to the industry, and some have been around for a few years, such as myself. But just think about, have you seen changes in maybe the skills, maybe the knowledge that you have to have, or the technology that's driving the industry? What are things that are being done the same way? Maybe things that have changed. How did you adapt to these changes? Did you have to learn a new skill? Maybe gain additional knowledge or integrate and learn new technologies and methods to be competitive in today's fast-paced construction industry? Well, thinking of maybe these changes, maybe the skills, the knowledge, or implementing technology, how did you learn to make these changes and, more importantly, be able to adapt? And that leads me right into the next question. If we don't adapt, if we don't grow, and we don't improve, what happens? Well, we know that as a company, we'll become stagnant. We'll see our profits start to decrease over time. Maybe our competition grows and they pass us. Maybe that's in gain market share. Maybe they start hiring some of our good employees. We start to lose what we may have considered good employees, but we start to lose some of them to our competition or maybe to other industries. So in today's webinar, really have 3 outcomes that we would like to cover. And the first one is why we should invest in our employees. The second is what is the cost of not investing in our employees? And most importantly, how investing in our employees pays off. So I'd like to start with a poll And I will go ahead and launch the poll. So if you could just take a real quick second to respond. As you can see there, what is your company's number one asset? Equipment? Is it the building and the land that maybe your business is on? Your customers, your employees? Is it the materials, maybe the methods? The technology that you have? Maybe you have some proprietary technology that is unique to your company, but what is that number one asset that you have that makes your company successful? I'll give it just another few seconds here. Have about half the group that's responded to that. All right, I will go ahead and close the polling here in 2, 1. And let's go ahead and share the results here. So really no surprise to myself here with what that number one asset is. I would agree with the group that our employees are our number one asset. And that is really why this webinar is so important to think of some of the information that we're going to share. So with the results of the poll, I think most of us, could guess that employees would be that number one asset. What is the mindset of your company? Is employee development an expense or cost to the company, or is it an investment in the future of the company? Now, it's a little bit of a rhetorical question here, not looking for actual answers or responses, but I want you to just kind of think, what is that mindset of your company or the leadership in your company? Maybe we even go as far as looking at the culture of our company. Do we hire people and expect them just to know what they need to be successful in their role? Or do we provide them with the tools, the training, and the resources to be successful, ultimately leading to the success of the company? So maybe we need to think of it a little bit differently. If we look at equipment versus employees, maybe we can look at the gas that we're putting into that bucket truck as being the same as the salary that we have for our employees. We know it's needed to keep it running, but it really doesn't do anything to grow or allow us to do more with it. And maybe we could relate the maintenance that we do on that truck to make it last a little bit longer, continue to make revenue for us, or provide a means for revenue, similar to training and developing our employees. We hire them based on a skill set that they have. They provide value to our organization, but we also know that we need to continue to train and develop those employees to stay current with the times, stay current with the ever-changing landscape in the construction industry. Provide them with training of just thinking back to this past year with all the changes that happened around the COVID pandemic, of having to work remotely, having more challenges on the job sites, and different safety precautions, that there was a lot of different things that we had to be able to adapt to in order to be successful in today's industry. Now, some of this we definitely were all learning as we went, but some of it's in the training and development that we provide our employees so that they know how to adapt and that they can go and find the solutions for the challenges that they are facing. So I'd like to share a quote with you from J.W. Marriott, the founder of Marriott Hotels and Hospitality, that taking good care of our employees, in turn, they'll take care of our customers, and our customers will come back. And I know we could just stop right now that that's kind of the apex of what we're talking about today, of taking care of our employees, investing in our employees, because ultimately we want them to take care of our customers. And when they take care of our customers, we'll be more profitable. We'll have those customers come back and ask us to do more work for them and continue to build that relationship. But we aren't going to stop there, that we have more information that we need to cover today. And actually, I'm going to start with the cost of not investing in our employees before we talk about why we should invest in our employees and that payback, or how that pays off. And looking at some statistics that I found, the cost of replacing them is an employee can be as much as 30% of their salary. So just throwing out a rough number based on some information I found on Indeed, a project manager on average across the country makes roughly $90,000 a year. So if we look at 30% of that, we're talking $27,000 to replace that employee. Again, do you agree with that number? More or less? Personally, I think it's a little too low. That that 30% fee is kind of the going rate for most placement agencies or headhunters or executive search firms. So let's take a little bit closer look at some of the actual costs associated with replacing an employee. So if we look at the cost of replacing an employee and break it into two categories, the direct hiring costs, such as ads on Indeed or LinkedIn, these can range anywhere from $5 a day to maybe a few $100s a day. So that can add up real quick over the month. Minimum $150, but can see that quickly approach $500, $1,000, depending on what role or position we're trying to fill within our organization. Again, mentioned placement agencies, that can be 20 to 30% of the first year's earnings. And what a lot of these placement agencies like to do is look at the complete earnings. So if there's any potential for bonuses or commissions, they want that factored into that calculation. So if we looked at, again, that $90,000 project manager, added an $18,000 bonus on that salary, we're at $108,000, and 30% of that becomes $32,400. Maybe there's some relocation costs that we have to get this new employee. I'm based here in Nebraska. Maybe I'm looking at hiring someone from the East Coast or the West Coast, and we have to pay some relocation costs to help get them or entice them to come work for us. Maybe there's a referral bonus or a sign-on bonus that can range anywhere from a few $100s to a few $1,000s. So if we start adding up all these direct costs, at the bare bones minimum, we're talking $35,000, but could easily approach $50,000 or more. And that's not even including the indirect costs that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen when we start looking at management's time and that lost time that we have from focusing on the high-value tasks that we need to accomplish in the day-to-day operations, to go and find these people and do interviews and bring somebody on board. This, again, could easily be a few $100s to a few $1,000s per week. Think of that person's supervisor. When we bring somebody new on board, again, this is going to vary depending on the skills and knowledge that they bring. But that supervisor is probably going to be 20 to 40% less effective while they're bringing this person up to speed. They may be a seasoned project manager, but somebody's got to, teach them how your systems, your software, your processes work to make sure that when they do go out there and interact with your customers, that they're doing it the same way that everybody else within your organization does. Any onboarding cost. And maybe when we look at onboarding and orientation, this could be the time for HR to get them the necessary paperwork, go through all the insurance requirements. Maybe there's specific safety things that they need to take care of before they're ready to start working for you. So again, few $100, few $1,000s, quite a range there. But then looking at the learning curve. Is it weeks or months till they truly get up to that 100% capacity and are providing the value that you hired them to provide to your company? Looking at things like lower morale of the other team members, maybe not giving it their all, that they're getting more added to their plate, and that kind of goes right into that next bullet point of overtime pay. Somebody's got to pick somebody's got to pick up the workload of that employee that left. So maybe it's not directly tied to hiring, but it's juggling all those other duties and tasks that employee that left was doing. Now that's spread across other people. that maybe their morale's down, you're paying somebody else to work more hours to get those things done. So the indirect cost to me is a lot harder to put a finite value on. So, it could be tens, 20s, $50,000 or more, but all said and done, we're right there in line with what that employee's salary was of $90,000 versus this number of 30% that we talked about before, as being a statistic that is shown as the cost of replacing employees. So that kind of leads me into really the whole big picture of why we need to invest in employees, and it's more than that simple payoff. That part of it is we want them to add value to our organization, make us more profitable, be able to do and manage more projects. But we also have to look at more of this negative side of what happens if we don't take care of our employees and they do leave, where they see that opportunity with one of our competitors, or maybe it's not even a competitor, but somebody else in the industry. But when we don't, like we talked about before, if we don't adjust, we don't adapt, we become stagnant, and then that's where things really start falling apart. So just looking at some electrical industry trends, we did a survey. Actually, it's almost a year old, but we looked at how companies were spending or providing training opportunities for their employees. And you can see on the left-hand side there that 90% of the respondents to our survey said that yes, in the past 12 months, they had invested in employee training and development to some level. On the right-hand side, breaks that down into all those that responded yes in the survey, how much they spent on that employee development. So you can see that the bulk of the group spent less than $250 per employee, while those that spent the most only represented about 9% of that surveyed group. I'm making a bit of an assumption here, but I would venture to guess that a large portion of the money spent is considered, it's still considered employee education and development, but it's probably along the lines of, continuing education units or continuing ed credits to maintain licenses and certifications, that it really isn't anything that's looking at advancing their knowledge and skills and making them more valuable to the organization. It's just kind of that maintenance piece of keeping those licenses and certifications current. So if we look at some averages, taking the information from the survey before, and this is where you can see where I came up with that roughly $90,000 number for a project manager. That came from Indeed with a survey that they had done across the construction industry, looking at 834 respondents. But if we go back and look at the breakdown of what companies are spending on employee development, we can see that it's a very small percentage of that individual's salary. Those that were spending less than $250 per employee, we're talking just over 0.25% of that person's salary, with the high end of the spend being, roughly just over 1%. A little bit more than that of that individual's salary. A study done by HR Magazine found that companies who spent at least $1,500 per employee on development saw a 24% increase in profits over those who spent less. So you can do the math on that. That $1,500 amount isn't a huge percentage of that employee's salary. It may sound like a large number, especially if you're with a larger company and have more employees. But man, if I knew I could spend $1,500 on my employees and it's going to help me increase my profits over my competition that isn't investing in their employees, definitely would want to listen more and find out how I can make that work for me. So when we look at employee development choices, is all employee development created equal? I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities, and we've seen even more of those this year with uh, webinars and seminars and everything being delivered electronically. But even thinking, prior to 2020, um, and we had in-person workshops that we could attend. Some of it was just online webinars, maybe online courses. Maybe some of you attended conventions and conferences that had employee development opportunities. Maybe some of you have brought people into your organization to work with your employees. But it doesn't have to necessarily be, these big grandioso training programs. Some of it's just as simple as doing some in-house training and development. Maybe it's a lunch and learn once a month. I'm going to use an example of an estimator. Maybe once a month the lead estimator comes up with a quick topic, a 5 or 10 minute topic on bonding or change orders or bid reviews, that then they can circle everybody that's involved with estimating and do a real quick lunch and learn of, what is the difference between a bid bond versus a performance and payment bond. Again, real simple topics, but it's that employee development, helping bring some of those younger people up to speed, or maybe even some of the more seasoned people that haven't dealt with bonds. It would be beneficial to them. Maybe it can be more on the people skills side of things, and it's how to effectively motivate and get more out of our people, whether that's our field personnel, maybe it's other people within the office, or it's things like this, attending a webinar to better yourself, with the idea you can take these ideas, this information, this knowledge back to your organization and share it with others. But some things that we know don't work when it comes to employee development are a one-size-fits-all approach. That, here's a catalog of courses and programs. They're developed maybe on high-level topics on certain things, but it isn't geared towards, maybe the specific needs of your company or the specific needs of your employees. I've seen programs that are long days. They start at 7 o'clock in the morning and they end at 7 o'clock in the evening. I just think back to when I was in school. Man, by the time the afternoon rolled around, my brain was so full of information, and it goes right into that next point, that information overload, that we start getting to a point where we can't retain any more new information. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. All this new information's coming at us, and we're trying to process how are we actually going to use that. Some of it just becomes going through the motions, that maybe someone's telling us we have to take a course, but it isn't really something that we're engaged, that we feel as necessary to our role within the organization. And then the last two there, a lot of training programs have no action and no accountability with them, have all these great information. Maybe it's even gone as far as, providing some case studies or examples that we can relate to of a situation we're dealing with on a job site, or that we're dealing with an employee. But they really don't give you those steps of how to truly put that into action. The other thing is there's really no clear purpose or expectations to what the training's supposed to do for the individual, for us as the manager, or for the company as a whole. But what we do know that works is, training programs or topics that are tailored to the specific individual, tailored to the company, and meeting the company's needs. Frequent, shorter sessions. Again, getting the information, like it says, into bite-sized pieces that we can take in the information, process that information, and most importantly, look and think about how we're going to actually use that information to provide that value to our organization. How is that information being reinforced? Not everybody learns the same way. Some people could have a brochure, read that brochure or a case study, and like that, have all that information absorbed and know how they're going to use it. Others might need to see an example of how it's being used, maybe tied to a specific scenario. Some of the training programs that we do, we like to do role-playing activities where we set the stage for the scenario, we give a little bit of a backstory, but then have the participants actually, I'm going to say act out how they would handle that situation or that scenario. So not only can they see how to use that information, but then the other participants can see a simulated real world example of how it is to be used. And that leads right into those last two bullet points there of, action and accountability, that it's putting that learning, putting that knowledge, those new skills into action, into use. But then the accountability piece comes from maybe the conversations or the relationship that employee has with their manager, or if it's leadership in the organization that they have with maybe others that are on the leadership team, or maybe it's two outside partners of, working with a contractor that's a younger entity, getting into some larger projects where they need to get bonding, don't have a whole lot of experience with bonding. They don't have some of the necessary resources and finances in place to be able to go in and get the bonding. So that might be something where the bonding company offers some training or provides them with some resources so they can be more accountable to the bonding company and to the bank in order to secure the bonding that they need. Again, what works is, having outcomes that align with the company goals. So everybody's probably seen, this illustration that I have here of, calculating return on investment. Going back to my slide with the bucket truck and the employee, maybe it's looking at revenue generated as compared to the total investment, or profit generated to the total investment. But when we look at things like equipment, technology, things like that, it's real easy to calculate a ROI, or return on investment. We can look at the initial cost of that piece of equipment, or in this case, the $100,000 for the bucket truck. What is our average rental rate per week? How much of the year is it going to be in service? So we can start creating some calculations here of, what does that revenue look like? Well, okay, we have revenue, but then we know that there's some maintenance and fuel that we have in there. So what is that net revenue that we have per year? Well, on that net of $43,500, we can see that we have a 2.3-year payback to cover the cost of that bucket truck. Looking at an 8 to 10-year useful life on that piece of equipment, we can then go into, what does that net revenue look like at the minimum, that 8-year, $348,000, and then look at what that net profit or approximate net profit looks like. That again, we have that 2.48 years, or 2.48 times return on investment, that we take the $248,000 divided by that initial purchase price of that truck. So when we look at calculating return on investment in employees, why is it so much harder to calculate that return on investment when we think of employee development? Well, a couple of things. The first is, we really don't know what to measure. Is it, money or dollars? Is it time, or the hours spent? And then secondly, we don't know how to measure that. Is that revenue and sales and the increase that they're going to get? Is it increased productivity, increased efficiencies, increased capacity with what they're able to manage or do in that role? Uh, in looking at the, what we're going to measure, how we're going to measure it, part of that equation that makes it difficult is we don't have a baseline to measure against. Is that a period of time, maybe 1 year to the next? Is it compared to other employees? Or is it compared to others in the industry? In the, one of the biggest challenges when we start looking at what that baseline is, are we comparing apples to oranges? Or maybe it is a little bit closer and we're comparing apples to apples, but are we comparing a green apple to a red apple? But making sure that we are, especially when we start comparing one employee to another employee, making sure that we truly understand, what their roles and responsibilities are, that just because their title is an estimator, or their title is a warehouse manager, or their title is a project manager, are they truly doing the same tasks day in and day out? Are they responsible for the same outputs as the person that you're comparing them to, so that we do have a good baseline to say, well, Joe, you went and took this class, or you did this training, and now we expect you to be 20% more efficient. Well, what does that 20% more efficient mean? Can they do more work than what they were able to? So if they were, bidding $50,000 a week, now all of a sudden they can bid $60,000 a week? Or is it that they takes less time to get that done? Or is it a junior estimator that you're trying to compare to maybe a more seasoned person? And it's comparing that, again, that baseline of somebody that's more established in that role, can get things done. What do we need to do to get everybody working at that same level? And then the last thing, that makes this return on investment calculation difficult is we don't have a clear goal for the investment. What is it that you wanted to accomplish by doing this employee development, this training, this workshop? Is it to improve their skills or learn new skills? Is it to gain knowledge? And is it, or is it to improve their performance? Not every piece of employee development programs is something where it's a new skill, or it's a hard skill that we have to learn. That there are, soft skills. Some things are just informational. I'm thinking back to some tax seminars that I participated in. Yeah, it's knowledge, not necessarily a skill, but it's that knowledge that we can use with our skills of calculating that into bids, how that changed, and how we had to calculate some of these new taxes into our service billings versus project billings, and what are the different variables or factors that we need to consider when we're using that new knowledge. So how will you measure your return on investment? Well, some of the things that we would want to take into consideration here is, having a clear understanding of what the benefit of that investment will be. And there's a couple different levels to that. What is that benefit to the employee, maybe to the department? But again, if the company's the one that's paying for that employee development, what is that, benefit or value to the company as a whole? Establish clear expectations of the employee before, during, and after the training. How are they going to use that information? Or, in my mind, I'm looking at it from a manager standpoint. If I send somebody to a half-day workshop, well, that's 4 hours of time that they weren't being, quote unquote, productive with running work, meeting with customers, whatever that is. So how is that trade-off of their time plus the cost of the program going to be used? And have those clear expectations of what we expect from those employees before, during, and after they do that training. As crazy as it sounds, I've done some workshops where I've had people that, you go around the room, they do their introductions, You ask them why they're there and what they hope to accomplish. Well, my boss says I needed to be here. Kid you not, I've seen an individual come to a multi-day workshop and sit there for 3 days and not participate because their boss told them that they had to be there. Definitely not a very high return on investment. From that for that individual or for that company. And then the last one here is, communicate with the employee of how they will use what they learned. And this is, again, kind of goes back to those expectations of more than just reading the course description or the description of the webinar, but having clear expectations and communicating that as the manager or as the leader of the company to those employees of, here's the information that it says you will have, so be listening for these types of things, but more importantly, have them come back and share with you or share with others within your organization of what is that information that they learned, how are they going to use it, and are there ways that others within the organization could use that as well. So then it boils down to the question of how much should you be investing? Well, I would definitely say your goal should be somewhere between 2 and 5% of each employee's salary. Now, again, we're talking, averages, looking at a broad spectrum here of what that looks like. Some employees we may want to invest more in because of the potential, the lifetime value that they provide to the organization, where maybe others it's helping to make sure that they do have that proper credentialing, the certifications, the licenses, that we want to do that because there is a value to the organization there. But if we look at, just across the board, construction industry average of $37,800 is that average salary, and we're talking a $750 to an $1,800, almost $1,900 annual investment. Now, again, when we're looking at this cost component, that's not just saying it's go out and sign up for an $1,800 seminar. You need to look at what some of those other costs are in there. There could be travel expenses, there's paying wages. I know there's some companies, they don't like their employees participating in training programs during the work week, because it takes away from the production of the project, that they would rather pay extra wages, pay some overtime to have the employee participate in those programs on the weekend because they know there is value, but that value trade-off isn't as much as what it is for that loss of production of not being on the job site. So again, we're looking at these numbers, and I'm sure some of you have already started doing the math of, well, how many employees do we have? What does this cost look like? It kind of goes back to one of those previous slides of looking at this employee development from a cost standpoint or an investment standpoint. And really what we're looking at here is if we're investing this money in our employees, so again, $750 to $1,900, well, our goal should be that 2 to 5% of their salary, but we also need to look at, well, what is our return on investment goal? I would say at the bare bone minimum, a 5 times return on that investment. To really make a difference, you should be looking at a 10 times. And if you're really looking at moving the needle, any of these training programs or employee development, whatever you title that, should be a 20 times return on investment. So looking at a $1,000 investment, bare bones minimum, $5,000 value to the company. Shoot for that $10,000 or that $20,000 value. And if we start looking at it from that mindset, maybe it changes how we think about employee development, a cost versus an investment. So looking at some other statistical information here, Harris Polls did a survey, and they said, they found in their survey that the #1 reason employees leave their current job is because of lack of career growth. Now, I've heard some conflicting responses here. I haven't read the entire survey because I've also heard that people leave companies because of their manager or poor managers, but a lot of it is because of the lack of career growth. So a little bit more positive take is a PwC survey. And in their survey, the top 3 characteristics that make a company compelling to work for are, of course, number 1, the opportunity for career progression or career growth. So back to the previous slide, why people were leaving. Number 2, competitive wages, which I don't think anybody's going to argue that point. And then number 3, excellent training and development programs. Well, in my mind, number 1 and number 3 kind of parallel each other. That career progression is going to be based on how those employees develop and provide more value to the organization, and that's done through training and some of these development programs. But can we do better? Well, a study done by Deloitte said 74% of employees said their development is important to the overall company strategy. But this follow-up question to that found that only 34% said that they are happy with their company's investment in them. So again, we can see through these various studies, these surveys, that businesses know that it's important to train and develop our employees, but that our employees want it just as much as the company does. So looking at some of the things that we know to be true of investing in our employees, that as individuals, there's increased job satisfaction, there's increased engagement, increased morale. We can find and discover new talents that we may not have known in some of our employees. And, it definitely is something we don't want to forget, but, how do we maybe find and address some of those weaknesses? Maybe not be able to change that in that individual, but then we can partner them or team them up with somebody else in the organization to handle some of those areas that might be challenges for them. Looking at it from more of a company standpoint here is, it helps us gain a competitive advantage. Maybe it's over our competition. Maybe it's, allowing us to take on bigger projects and expand the current capabilities of our team. We know that there's lower turnover, and we've already seen what that turnover can cost the company for a good employee that leaves. We know that it creates higher productivity, higher profits, and helps us develop that internal talent pool. We know that companies with engaged employees, and this is through a Gallup study here, see profits as much as 21% higher when compared to companies with lower engagement. So just looking at just those two things, investing in our employees creates that culture of engagement, gets them bought into the organization, and in turn increases the profits of the company. Some of the benefits of engaged employees, of course, less absenteeism, lower turnover, increased customer satisfaction, more productive, higher profits, fewer accidents, better overall performance, more accountable for their area of responsibility. They tend to be the ones that go the extra mile. They're more of that team player, willing to help pick up some of the load that somebody else has. All of us in the construction industry have definitely experienced times when we're burning that midnight oil trying to meet that deadline of a bid or a proposal for a customer. When you have employees that are engaged, bought into what the company's doing, they're going to be those ones that go that extra mile. They're going to work as a team, help bring everything together, ultimately for the success of the organization. But I'm sure some of you have seen, what I'm going to call the corporate dichotomy here, where you have the CEO and the CFO arguing about this, investing in employees, where the CEO is so doggone worried of the pennies and the dollars, and what if we invest this money and we train them and they leave? Well, and then you have the CEO there, and he's saying, well, what is the outcome if we don't invest in them and they stay? So not only do we know that if we invest in our employees, they're more engaged, they're less likely to leave and go to our competition, but just thinking about what this says right here in this cartoon. Well, what if we don't train our employees? We don't develop them. We don't continue to have them grow, and they stay working for us. Goes right back to one of those earlier slides, that then we become stagnant. We become set in our ways, and it allows for others, maybe less qualified, to start getting their foot in the door with some of our customers and start taking some of those projects that we had always done in the past. Next thing you know, our market share shrinks, and we're left in the dust. So in something like, this scenario here, who wins? Is it the CEO or is it the CFO, or can they both win? And I think, looking at ways of how we can protect ourselves from this potential of employees leaving, and getting the most out of that investment is, set clear expectations. A lot of it just boils down to communication. Get some commitment from the employee of, what are they going to do? How are they going to use that information? Maybe it's even tying the development to annual employee reviews. Definitely need the buy-in from upper level management of making this investment in the people, and supporting that it becomes, part of that culture of maybe them spending time outside of the office, but looking at it from that investment standpoint. And just like I have there with that next bullet point, making this part of your company culture of that continual improvement, always looking to get better, and really getting that buy-in from the employees you are investing in. This is one of the development people on the Schneider Electric team. I love a couple of things that he said in the article that I was reading here, that, Schneider's mentality is they've always told their employees that they own their careers, that they're in the driver's seat. That it's got to be more than just doing their day-to-day jobs, that if they want to grow, they want to advance, they're the ones that have to take some of that initiative. But you can see there in the second part of that quote there that it becomes the employer's or the company's responsibility to provide those opportunities for the employees to acquire the new skills, the new experiences, and have a way to grow. So I want to leave you with three main numbers to remember here. The 5 times, and the 5 times or the 5x is that minimum return on investment, that when you look at any employee development or training that you're looking at, enrolling one of your employees in or sending your employee to, at bare bones minimum, seek that 5 times return on investment. The 24% is, that profit increase compared to those companies who spend less than $1,500 per employee annually on training and development. And then the last one there is 30%. That we could see that 30% of that employee's salary to replace them. That was a statistic given from a report. But with looking at those direct and indirect costs of replacing that employee, we can see that 30% could easily become 50, 60, even 100% of that employee's salary to ultimately replace them for that role. Another quote that I just wanted to share with you here, Richard Branson, I'm sure most of you are familiar with who he is, CEO and founder of Virgin Group. But a quote that he had here is, train your people well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. And I think there's a great message there in those few words that really, talks to what we would cover today in this webinar, of the importance of investing in our employees. But it's got to be a two-way street. It can't be something where it's only benefits the company. As a company, we have to treat these employees well enough, provide them with those growth opportunities, and make them feel that they are a part of the organization to ensure that they do stay and not take those skills, that knowledge, that experience that we provided to them, and allow our competition to be more competitive. So with that, I will open it up to questions. Stan, I did see a comment here in the chat. I haven't had a chance to read it, so I'm going to read that real quick. Anybody else, if you have questions, comments, would love to hear from you in the chat or in the question and answer. area of the Zoom meeting. So go ahead and send any questions or comments over, and we'll try to get those answered. Sure. Yeah, and Stan, I can definitely see, your point there, and I think part of it would be is defining what frequent and what shorter sessions are. In my mind, even a half a day is a lot shorter than a full day, to where we can have a very specific agenda for that session, desired outcomes, so that we get through that information. But it almost has to be something where we have maybe it's scheduled weekly or it's every afternoon, that there has to be some consistency to make it work. Yeah, so Joseph said, the training costs are easy calculated. Any better way to determine ROI? And Joseph, I think to answer your question there, it's really looking at, as far as the dollars and cents, that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult. But the easiest way to do that is truly figuring out what is it that you want to measure with that training or development that the employee is participating in. And I don't think it's just a hard and fast rule that you can put all the training into this equation and it spits out that dollar amount, because we know that, I'm thinking back to maybe you have a low voltage group, and you have a class on splicing fiber optic cable. Well, that's going to be a lot easier to calculate that return on investment of, okay, these individuals learned this new technique. They can be more efficient than maybe the previous techniques that they were using for that, versus how do you put an exact dollar amount on a program that maybe helps somebody better manage their time? Well, they're going to create some efficiencies. They're going to get some of the things off their plate that maybe they should be delegating to others, realize where they are wasting some of their time. It becomes a little bit more difficult to put an exact dollar amount on there. But we could probably, create some spreadsheets and spend some time saying, okay, well, this is what this employee gets paid per hour. And through this program, they were able to carve out an extra 4 hours a week. So if they're, $50 an hour, that's $200 per week that we can use their talents better somewhere else. So I know that was a little bit of a wordy response to your question there, but hopefully it provided a little bit more insight. Yeah, so Bob has a question there. Any suggestions of non-monetary investments in personnel other than training? Bob, I think, one of the biggest things that companies miss out on is, having some type of an internal mentor program. Really, the only cost there is the individual's time of not doing their specific tasks or duties, but pairing younger people within the organization with more seasoned, more experienced people, but having some type of an internal mentorship program. Maybe it's, how do you use the talents, skills, and knowledge of people that are within your organization to create some internal training programs, as opposed to bringing in outside trainers or sending people to outside classes. Maybe it's something with, going back to code training for licenses. Maybe it's worth investing in one individual to get the certification to be able to offer those courses and then have it done internally. I've seen in a lot of larger companies where they have training departments, maybe it's tied to HR or a training director that facilitates a lot of that internal training that's available to the company. Any other questions or comments? I know we're approaching the 60-minute mark here. So I do want to say thank you to everyone that took time out of your Wednesday morning or afternoon, depending on where in the country you are. I know this is a bit of a crazy week with the holidays and everything, so I do appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to participate in our webinar. As always, we offer these webinars free once a month. Typically, they're on the last Wednesday of the month. We move this one up by a week with that crazy holiday week or crazy week between the holidays. So we will not be having another one next week, but we are already working on our schedule for 2021, have some great topics that we will be covering on our future webinars. So please stay tuned and would love to have you participate in future webinars. Happy to answer a few more questions with the remaining time we have. But again, thank you all for participating in the webinar. See some names on the attendee list that have been to many of our webinars in the past. So thank you all for your continued support and look forward to seeing you at some of our future webinars.